Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with ericstrains.com. Today we're going to take a look at one of the new 3-rail O-scale Norfolk Southern Heritage ES44ACs from Lionel. Okay, so here's the Lionel Central of Georgia Norfolk Southern Heritage ES44. And at this point, I'm going to assume that most of you who are watching this video are already big fans of the Norfolk Southern Heritage fleet and know a whole lot about it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the actual fleet. But as you probably already know, the fleet consists of 20 engines. Some of those are SD70s, some of them are ES44s. And so both Lionel and MTH have created their own heritage fleets of SD70s and ES44s to celebrate the real fleet. Now, as for me, right now, I have 3 of the Lionel Heritage SD70s. I have 1 of the Lionel Heritage ES44s that you see right here. And then I have 1 of the MTH Heritage ES44s. I'm going to add more of them to my fleet over time. I don't know if I'll get all 20 engines in my fleet, but I'm going to try to get as many as I can before it's all said and done with. Now, the ES44 is not a brand new model for Lionel. They've done it before. The difference is that the previous ES44s that they did over the last few years were very high-end models. They were Vision Line style models that had die-cast metal shells and a lot of advanced features that made them very cool engines, but also very expensive engines, and therefore less affordable. So when it came time for Lionel to do the Norfolk Southern Heritage fleet, they needed to downgrade the ES44 to a more affordable model. And that meant replacing the die-cast metal shell with a plastic shell and stripping out some of the advanced features that made it so expensive. So that's what they did. And it makes sense that they did that because the SD70s were already a plastic body diesel, so it would have been weird to have all of the SD70s be relatively affordable plastic body diesels, and then all of the ES44s be really expensive die-cast metal Vision Line style diesels. So for me, this really isn't about a new model. When I brought this engine home, my main concern was whether or not Lionel did the downgrade in the right way. I wanted to see if they had stripped away the features that weren't quite necessary, but kept the core features that made the original die-cast ES44 so cool, and it looks like they did that. I'm mainly talking about the sound system. The sound system in the original die-cast ES44s was fantastic, and there was no reason to go changing it, and it looks like Lionel did the wise thing. In my comparisons, it looks like the sound system in these new, more affordable ES44s is the same as in the original die-cast ES44s. So, in my opinion, Lionel did the downgrade right, they were smart, and this is a great model. Anyway, what we're going to do is start off with some stats on this engine, and then we'll go in for a closer look at some of the details on this model, and I'll point out some of the places where they cut features out to make these things more affordable, and I may even pull up one of my die-cast ES44s just to highlight the differences, and after that, we'll take it for a spin around the layout. So let's get started. Okay, so the length of the engine is 18 inches, the weight is 6 pounds 1 ounce, it has about 2 pounds 15 ounces of pulling power, and the minimum curve needed to operate this engine is 0.54. On the inside, the engine is powered by 2 flywheel motors, 1 per truck, and you've also got the electronics inside for the legacy control system, as well as legacy rail sounds, and there's also an operating smoke unit as well. Now, there are 3 ways to operate this engine. The preferred method is to use Lionel's legacy command system because that will give you access to all of the engine's advanced features. However, if you don't have legacy, you can also run the engine with Lionel's classic TMCC command system, or you can run the engine conventionally. Okay, I've gone ahead and pulled up one of the previous die-cast ES44s. In this case, it's the Kansas City Southern that they put out a couple years ago. And looking at these two side by side, right off the bat, it looks like the new NS Heritage ES44s are a combination of old and new. Now, I don't work for Lionel, so I don't know the full story, but it looks to me like the plastic shell is a new tooling because it looks sufficiently different from the die-cast shell that it's probably a new tooling. And meanwhile, it looks like everything below the shell, the pilots, the trucks, the fuel tank, and so forth, are carryovers from the die-cast ES44s. So in a nutshell, everything from the plastic shell up is new, and then everything below the waist is from the original die-cast ES44s. And that's good, because it means they've updated the tooling for the shell, and as a result, it more accurately reflects the configuration of the actual NS Heritage ES44s. Let's take a look at the front of the Heritage ES44 and compare it to that of the die-cast ES44. Well, one of the really cool things that I'm happy to see that they brought over from the die-cast ES44 is the presence of the semi-fixed pilot. You can see it over here on the die-cast ES44, and they've also got it now on the new Heritage ES44s. There's one on the front and one on the back. Now, for those of you who are new to the hobby or may not know what I'm talking about, and maybe sitting there saying, Eric, what is a semi-fixed pilot and why do I care? Let me take a moment and explain what that's all about. Here we have a typical 3-rail O-scale engine, and this is actually one of the Lionel NS Heritage SD70s, the Virginian to be exact. And if we take a look at the pilot truck configuration, this is what you typically see on a 3-rail O-scale engine. The pilot and the truck are connected together, and they move together as the engine operates. Now, this is horribly unprototypical because on a real engine, the pilot is connected to the body of the engine and it does not move. But the reason they do this on most 3-rail O-scale engines is because it's a compromise. This setup allows these engines to negotiate much tighter turns than they would normally be able to go through if they had a fixed pilot. And that's because 3-rail O-scale takes up a lot of real estate, and many people just don't have the space for big, wide, sweeping curves. And so you get a lot of modelers with O36 or O54 curves. And if something like this had fixed pilots, they would not be able to run these engines on those types of layouts. And so they have this compromise so that the engine appeals to a wider range of modelers and more people can own and operate these engines. Here we have a Lionel genset switcher, and this is the complete opposite of what I just showed you. This engine has fixed pilots. You can see the truck moves independently of the pilot, and the coupler is attached to the fixed pilot. Now, we've still got the big O-gauge coupler, but this is a much more prototypical setup because the pilot is fixed. Now, Lionel was able to get away with a fixed pilot on this engine because it's a relatively small engine and it's got 4-wheel trucks. So even though it has fixed pilots, it can still negotiate pretty tight turns. Now, here we have the original Lionel Vision Line GE Evolution Hybrid ES44. It's a fantastic model, and it was the first model to have the semi-fixed pilot. The same semi-fixed pilot that's on the Heritage ES44. And the reason they did it was because this engine was too big to have a fixed pilot, because if it had a fixed pilot, it would require really wide curves, and therefore a lot of 3-rail modelers would simply have not been able to buy one of these things because they wouldn't have been able to run it. But they didn't want to have the pilots attached to the trucks because that would look very unrealistic, and they wanted these things to look as realistic as possible. So they came up with this innovative approach that's sort of a best of both worlds answer. You have the pilot that's attached to the body of the engine, so the trucks turn independently, but yet the pilot has this spring mechanism on it that allows it to move a little bit. And so you get the appearance of a realistic fixed pilot most of the time, but yet you have a little give to the pilot that allows the engine to negotiate tighter turns. So as you can see, the semi-fixed pilot is a really cool innovation, and I'm happy that it survived the transition from the more expensive die-cast ES44 to the more affordable Heritage ES44. And my guess is that the reason it's still there is just pure economics. It was probably less expensive for Lionel to simply reuse the existing tooling for the bottom part of the engine and keep the semi-fixed pilot than to create a new tooling where the pilots were attached to the trucks. So it's sort of a win-win situation. Lionel wins because they get more use out of the same tooling down here, and we win because we get a more affordable ES44, but we've still got this cool semi-fixed pilot feature that's a leftover from the original Vision Line ES44. Moving up from the semi-fixed pilot, the front of the cab has been changed to be more in line with the real Heritage ES44s. The door is now on this side as opposed to this side on the die-cast ES44, but the door on the die-cast ES44 opens up like that, which is a nice touch. Over here we've just got a cast-in door. It'd be great if it opened up, but it's not the end of the world, no big deal. The headlight has been moved from here to up here, which is correct for these Heritage units. The number boards are now white, which is also correct. And the shape of some of these grab irons has also been changed to reflect how it is on these Heritage units. The sides of the cab have also been changed. The window configuration is now a bit different than the way it was on the die-cast ES44, but the windows do still open and close, which is always a nice touch. Down here, these compartments on the original die-cast ES44s, these could be opened up to reveal a detailed compartment inside. However, on the new ES44s, they're simply cast in. But that was pretty much guaranteed to happen when they went to a plastic shell, so that's not a big surprise. The door on the back of the cab of the die-cast ES44 opens up like that, whereas the door on the back of the Heritage ES44 is cast in and does not open. Again, it'd be great if it did, but it's not that big of a deal that it doesn't. The sides of the Heritage ES44 look pretty good, and when compared to the die-cast ES44, the big difference is that the sides of the die-cast ES44 have a lot of panels and vents and so forth that are separately applied pieces, and therefore everything has a little more depth to it, whereas on the sides of the new Heritage ES44, almost everything is cast in. But they still did a good job with it, and it looks fine. And of course, they did make some changes to the configuration of the vents and panels and so forth on the sides of the new Heritage ES44 to reflect the configuration of the real thing. The back of the Heritage ES44 looks pretty good. Just like the front, we've got a semi-fixed pilot back here with lots of separately applied detailing on it. Up above that, we've got separately applied grab irons on either side of the back here, and we've also got an operational reverse light. Now, if we compare this to the die-cast ES44, we can see that it's essentially the same, but the configuration of the reverse light has been changed. Also, the shape of these grab irons and the shape of the end of the deck have been changed. On the roof of the Heritage ES44, the biggest changes were at the front end and the back end. On the front end, you can see on the cab roof of the die-cast ES44, there's a lot of intricate detailing and separately applied parts. And then, of course, the rooftop of the die-cast ES44 could be removed to reveal the highly detailed cab interior. Now, it was almost a no-brainer that that would go away when they downgraded to the more affordable Heritage ES44, so that's no big surprise that the removable roof and the detailed cab interior are history. But they also got rid of some of this intricate detailing up here, but that's okay because what they actually did was change the configuration on the roof of the cab so that it actually looks like the roof of the real Heritage ES44. Toward the middle of the roof, we've got a smokestack with an operating smoke unit inside, and the smoke unit has actually undergone some change as well. When Lionel built the original Vision Line hybrid ES44, it had sort of an intelligent smoke unit, and the way it worked was that during normal operations, you would just get a thin wisp of smoke coming out of the smoke unit. And then when you would rev the engine up, when you would increase the RPMs, you would get a big plume of smoke, and then that would eventually taper back down to a thin wisp. And that was meant to emulate the emissions-friendly configuration of the real ES44. And it was really cool, and that functionality carried through all of the die-cast ES44s. But now, with the more affordable Heritage ES44s, that functionality has been done away with, and it's been replaced with a standard fan-driven smoke unit. The big change on the backside of the roof involves these operating cooling fans. If you recall, when I reviewed one of these die-cast ES44s a while back, I showed you these operating fans. There's a little motor on the underside, and the way it works is that when the engine reaches a certain RPM level, these fans engage and they actually spin. It's really clever, and it's really one of the coolest features of the die-cast ES44s and of the original Vision Line ES44. Now, of course, there was no way this feature was going to survive the downgrade to the more affordable Heritage ES44, so it should come as no surprise that on the Heritage ES44, those fans are simply cast in and there's no motor or anything else on the underside. Now, while I've got this piece off, let me show you that just like on the die-cast ES44, we've got the master engine controls here. We've got the run program switch, the Odyssey speed control on-off switch, the smoke unit on-off switch, and the master volume control. Here's a look at the underside of the Heritage ES44. Because Lionel reused the underside of the die-cast ES44, everything's the same. So we've got 2 pickup rollers per truck for a total of 4. There are 2 traction tires per truck for a total of 4. All 6 wheels on each truck are driven, which is nice. And then we've got the 2 speakers here for the sound system. Okay, the last thing we're going to do before we start this thing up is BFIMO, best feature in my opinion. Well, best feature is sort of a no-brainer. I went on and on at the beginning of this video about how happy I was that they kept the original die-cast ES44 sound system. So for me, the best feature on these new Norfolk Southern Heritage ES44s is the sound system. They sound fantastic. Okay, so I've got both the NS Heritage ES44 and the die-cast ES44, and I'm going to start both of these up and let you hear the sounds on each of these and do sort of a sound comparison so that you can see that the sound system from the die-cast ES44 was moved over to the Heritage ES44. And then once you've heard all the sounds on the new Heritage ES44, we'll go ahead and take it for a spin around the layout. Okay, let's start up the Heritage ES44 first.
This is the dispatcher. Do you copy? Yes, sir. Loud and clear. Over. Very good. Start up and hold. Roger that. Start up and hold. Out.
Okay, and now let's start up the die-cast ES44.
Kansas City Southern 4655. Do you copy?
Roger that. Kansas City Southern 4655. Read you loud and clear.
Please start her up and stand by for track orders.
KCS 4655. I'm starting up the engine.
When it comes to the sound effects on these engines, the 3 sounds that they moved over from the die-cast ES44 were the prime mover, the horn, and the bell, which are the most important in my opinion. So those sounds sound exactly the same on the new Heritage ES44. That's good. Okay, first up, let's compare the horns. Here's the horn on the die-cast ES44. And here's the horn on the Heritage ES44. As you can see, they sound pretty much the same. Now here's the bell on the die-cast ES44. And now here's the bell on the Heritage ES44. Now the bell on the Heritage ES44 is a slightly different pitch, but I think it's still pretty close. Okay, now let's compare the 2 prime mover sounds. I'm going to turn the sounds on the Heritage ES44 down so that we're just hearing the die-cast ES44 for a second. Okay, now you're just hearing the die-cast ES44. Sounds pretty good. Okay, I've got both engines to full volume again, and now I'll turn down the die-cast ES44. And here are the prime mover sounds for the Heritage ES44. And as you can see, they sound almost identical to the die-cast ES44, which is good. Okay, now we've got the Heritage ES44 by itself, and I want to show you how the various RPM levels sound. So I'm going to go ahead and rev up the engine and then rev it back down. on the roof. Now let's go back down. So I'm going to play you some of the Crew Talk sounds on the new Heritage ES44. Now, the difference between the Crew Talk sounds on the die-cast ES44s and the Crew Talk sounds on the new Heritage ES44s is that on the die-cast ES44s, the Crew Talk was road number specific, whereas on the new Heritage ES44s, it's just generic Crew Talk dialogue, like Lionel's been using on all of their recent models. So let's give it a listen. And again, I know a lot of you guys don't like Crew Talk. If you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to use it.
I'm ready to roll, dispatcher. Can I get to the main line? Over. Roger that. Take the green. Over. Roger that. Cleared outbound. Out. Dispatcher here. You're cleared outbound. Over. Roger that. Cleared outbound. Out. Dispatcher, my train's made up. Am I clear? Over. Negative. Hold your position. Over. Okay. Understood. Out. This is the dispatcher. Please hold. Over. Will do, dispatcher. Out.
One of the most interesting holdovers from the die-cast ES44 is the presence of a sleep function. When Lionel first built the Vision Line Hybrid ES44, they built a sleep function into it that would put the engine to sleep after about 30 seconds of idle time. And this mirrored the sleep function of the real hybrid ES44s. And so they've still got that function even in these Heritage ES44s. Now, I don't know if that's exactly prototypical for a Heritage ES44. I don't know if they still have those sleep functions or not, but they still have that function in these models. So let's let this engine sit here for a minute and it'll go to sleep. And there it goes. It's gone to sleep. And now to wake it up, I can either move the engine or blow the horn or throw a coupler or some other function. So I'll go ahead and throw a coupler and wake it up. And there we go. Pretty cool. Okay, we're just about ready to move out. Now, one last thing I want to mention is that one nice addition that Lionel did make to the sound system on these Heritage ES44s that was not present on the die-cast ES44s is the presence of sequence control, and that's the automation of the sound effects when the engine is in motion. It's a nice effect, and to activate it, I'm going to press and hold the aux 1 key on the Legacy remote. Okay, that sound means that sequence control is activated, so let's go ahead and roll it out.
Dispatcher, we're on the move. Train is outbound. Over. Roger that. Have a good run. Out. Clear ahead. Over. Very good. On schedule. Out. Dispatcher here. Notice slow speed. Over. Slow speed. Out. I'm going to sign the register book, dispatcher. Out.
All right, that about wraps it up for this review. This is a great engine, and as I said, I'm really pleased with the way that Lionel has managed to downgrade the ES44 to make it more affordable for the Heritage series, and yet still kept it as a high-quality model. Now, as for myself, I'm planning on getting as many of these Norfolk Southern Heritage units as I can. I don't know if I will get all 20, but you never know. If you're interested in purchasing one of these, the retail price is just under $550, and they also make a non-powered unit that sells for just under $280. And of course, if you go through a good Lionel dealer, you should be able to get a decent discount off those retail prices. And as always, if you're looking for a good train store to buy from, try my friends over at Legacy Station. You can call them at 770-339-7780 or find them on the web at www.legacystation.com. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with ericstrains.com. Today we're going to take a look at one of the new 3-rail O-scale Norfolk Southern Heritage ES44s from Lionel. Wow, that's a mouthful.